including women, are swelling that population. That's a form of social control. They do it through terror. This is what lethal police force in this country is about. It's like lynching in that it's not just about killing, I think, 3.1 people, unarmed fellow citizens, usually people of color, poor people, a day. But like lynching, it creates a state of terror so that if you are the parents, even the mayor of New York has had to concede this, if you are the parents with a young black man who walks out, you want him home by dark because he may not come home. I mean, this is just like Jim Crow South. And when Hannah Arendt writes about the plight of the stateless, she herself being stripped of her German passport, living in France with no rights, said that when you create both the legal and the physical mechanisms to strip people of rights, rights become privileges. And that's where we are. And once rights become privileges, then they can be taken away from anybody. So I live in Princeton, which, is increasingly the domain of the upper 1%, unfortunately. And so you don't see it. You don't see it in Manhattan. But all of the mechanisms, the constitutional mechanisms by which we once were able to defend ourselves, have been taken from us by judicial fiat, by a reinterpretation. I mean, the Constitution is quite clear in the 14th Amendment about search and seizure. They don't have a right to all of our personal information without a warrant, yet they have it. Right to privacy, all of that's gone. And then they'll take, through Citizens United, the absurd idea that unlimited, dark campaign contributions by corporations is the right to petition the government or a form of free speech. These are the legal system or the judicial system, the 1 million lawyers in this country, when the history of this country is written, where were they? Where were the, all these people talking about the going back to the Constitution, like Scalia and others? Well, what about privacy? What about search and seizure under the 14th? The legal system, as I don't want to draw comparisons too tightly with Nazi Germany, but they have been a bulwark they've sold their soul to corporations and corporate power, and this is not just true. I mean, we have figures that the Trump administration, Gorsuch and others, has pushed, but Obama was just as guilty as this. I mean, most of the federal judgeships that he appointed, they were all corporate lawyers. They all serve corporate power.
Listen, I'm reminded, because of being in the field of economics, as I'm watching the so-called tax reform process underway, that from Trump on down through all the others, there's this endless talk about helping the middle class, the lower class, cutting their taxes. And when you look at what they're actually doing, there's something here that's almost genius. They're cutting taxes on corporations, 12 ways to Sunday, and on very wealthy people. The numbers that you can put together are clear, but their ability to have the press carry their verbal nonsense instead of the analytic means that you have a kind of general consensus to do something which the same people who believe in this would hate if they understood what happened to them.
Right. Well, first of all,
what's going on? You're the journalist in a way. Tell me.
Well, first of all, it's not a tax reform; it's a tax boycott.
Yes.
I mean, most of these Fortune 500 companies are Citibank. They don't pay any taxes at all. So let's be clear about what they've orchestrated. That's the first thing. The second thing, and Matt Taibbi did a nice book on this called Divide.
Right.
There's a two-tiered legal system in the country. So if you're a small business owner, you are crushed. I mean, you can pay up to 40% of your profits in taxes. Right. You have all sorts of regulations. But if you're Goldman Sachs, that's very different. And so the perception among our dwindling small business community is that government is intrusive. There are too many regulations. Taxes are too high. And they're right. But on the upper scale, where all these lobbyists, banking lobbyists, and hedge fund lobbyists are writing the legislation, it's naked kleptocracy and pillage.
But then tell me, for all these small businessmen, and I agree with everything you said, they've been through this now. They have seen their critique of the government as intrusive and burdensome be used not to relieve them of the burdens, but to help the biggest ones. They've been through this. Can they be fooled again?
Well, it's not a matter of being fooled. It's where do you go to get the information? I mean, PBS is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Koch brothers. No, literally.
Yeah.
The News Hour, I mean, I was just on WGBH. David Koch sits on the board. So where do you go for the information? You have to go to the fringes to your show, to what I write, but we've been so marginalized. And as I was saying before the show, that's not true in Canada. I'm on prime time on CBC, nationally, for a half hour. I'm nationally in France on Radio France, or, my last book got a 2-page spread in Le Monde. It's on, and of course my last book here, although it got on the front page of the New York Times Sunday Book Review, was given to the troglodyte George Backer, who trashed it, which is why they gave it to him. Yeah. So it's that kind of rational discussion of economic pillage and corporate power is unacceptable within the mainstream discourse. Just like climate change, just like all sorts of stuff. And so unless you're extremely proactive, and most people are not proactive about getting information, and less people read, which I think is a tremendous problem, because you have to struggle through. I didn't read all of 3 books of Marx's Capital, but I did get through one, which has more math than I needed. But you have to read that. You have to read Polanyi. You have to read the stuff you write. You have to, and so that takes. There's, I think, a small percentage of the population that will do it, but it's probably in single digits.
All right, here comes the $64 trillion question. Given what you write, given what you see, given what I see, given what I write, given what our audience, which is why we have an audience, is it premature to think of a significant movement for social change emerging here in the United States? In the title of your book, The Moral Imperative to Revolt, is that imperative being felt and seized and internalized by the people of the United States, or at least a significant portion? Do you see the blowback from everything you've witnessed and described? Do you see that?
Yes, but it may be a far-right blowback. There is going to be blowback. We're in a period, Alexander Berkman wrote an essay, and he talked about, when old ideas, in the old turn of the century it was monarchy, divine right of kings. In our case, it's neoliberalism. When they lose their credibility, and neoliberalism has lost. It's a zombie ideology. No one believes, even the banks don't believe it, because how can you believe it if you then go loot the U.S. Treasury? I mean, who knows what they believe other than greed is good. So that ideology, which quite effectively stripped the nation state of its assets and impoverished the working class to make it the working poor, and radically atrophied and diminished the middle class, it doesn't have its currency. But we don't have, and this is what Berkman writes, anything to take its place yet. And so that's a very dangerous moment. For me, a seminal and very frightening moment was the reaction of the state to the Occupy movement. Because what the Occupy movement asked was so tepid, as so many, if you remember Tiananmen Square, or even when I covered the revolution in East Germany, originally in Leipzig, the opposition just wanted legal recognition. They ended up overthrowing the Stasi state. So what the Occupy movement, what did they ask for? And they did have demands. They asked for that corporate power be restrained, that there be jobs programs, that there be universal health care.
And that the 1% 99 would not be that way.
Well, and that they would not be burdened with $100,000 in student loans while they were working in a deli. So, these were very rational, reasonable demands. And what was the response of the state? It was to, in a coordinated effort under the Obama, was to shut them down physically. Yeah. And that is dangerous. So is there going to be blowback? There is. But that blowback may be very ugly. It may be blowback by a disenfranchised white working class. What happens when these people realize that Trump has sold them out?
Right. Big question.
And they've all got guns. I mean,
and he is selling them out.
And he is selling them out. And thank God, Charlottesville, these on both sides, but in particular on the right, they were armed to the teeth. And all you need is one person to pull out their Glock and start firing the crowd, and you've got dozens wounded and dead. And that's what's coming. And of course, that's a gift to the state, because then they use it. What they want to, they're already using it to demonize the left. It's why I've been critical of the Black Bloc and Antifa. Their goal is to shut down even those of us who are nonviolent anti-capitalist. They want that shut down, because internally these people are frightened. They know far better than you and I how utterly corrupt and depraved the system is. And I think Occupy frightened them immensely,
yes.
More than the Occupy activists understood. Because if anybody knows how game the system is, it's all those criminals sitting in Goldman Sachs or Citibank. I mean, let's be clear, they are criminals. They are clearly under, if we consider massive fraud a criminal activity, they should be, I'm kind of a prison abolitionist, but they should be handing out soup somewhere, in Camden, New Jersey.
Cleaning their diapers. Yes, that's right.
They know, and they're prepared. And the seizure of any state, paralysis, this is what we have, is political paralysis. The inability of the state or the government to respond to the most minimal rights and needs of the citizenry, and the diversion of all resources to the further enrichment of a global oligarchic criminal class, means that eventually, because these people only know one word and that's more, it means eventually there's blowback. But given the fact that the left has been so decimated in the United States, and what I see as often articulating the left, groups like Black Bloc and Antifa, which I find immature, juvenile, and catharsis is not how we carry out a revolution, throwing a rock through a window. We have to be extremely tactical and well thought out, and disciplined. I mean, we can have another show on Lenin, but Lenin understood the danger of random acts of violence and terrorism, which he was rabidly against. We could very well slip into a kind of corporatized, militarized, it's not fascism, because as Sheldon Wolin points out, in fascism, politics trumps economics, and corporate totalitarianism, economics trumps politics, but some kind of very frightening dystopia.
Well, I don't want to leave us on a note of dystopia, but it's a realistic process, and we have to face it as part of it.
We have to fight it. We have to fight it. And, that's that great line I use at the end of my book, I don't fight fascists because I'm going to win. I fight fascists because they're fascists.
That's right. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
And thank all of you for joining us. Once again, I hope you found this as fascinating and interesting as I did. I want to thank you for partnering with us. I want to thank truthout.org, that independent source of news and analysis that has been a good partner for Economic Update for years. I look forward to talking with you again next week.